A fractal is generally a rough or fragmented geometric shape that can be split into parts, each of which is, at least approximately, a reduced-sized copy of the whole, a property called self-similarity. The term fractal was coined by Benoit Mandelbrot in 1975 and was derived from the Latin fractus, meaning broken or fractured. A fractal often has the following features. It has a fine structure at arbitrarily small scales. It is too irregular to be easily described in traditional geometric language. It is self-similar. You're probably wondering, how do people make fractal art? Are they just truly amazing artists? Well, true, many of them are, but they had some help. I'm going to show you how to develop a fractal using the most simple example of a very common fractal, the Mandelbrot method. You will need to have at least some prior knowledge of complex numbers. Pick some complex number for C and define this function. You may start with z equals 0. Note that z will often be a complex number. Iterate the function f by taking each value output from the function and putting it back into the function. For example, let's pick c equals 1 plus I and follow this process for a few steps. Now we know that the function of 0 equals 0 to the power of 2 plus z, or 1 plus I, which will equal 1 plus I. In a fractal generating program, you can use that 1 plus I to represent something in an image, usually on a graphing plane, as coordinates, for example. This is a very simple process and can be worked out by hand fairly quickly. It can be worked out by a computer in the blink of an eye. The fractal shown here is an exact result of the calculations we just performed. It is famously known as the Mandelbrot fractal. So you see, more complicated calculations result in more intricate fractals. Like numbers, fractals are infinite, usually by at least some type of self-similarity. Exact similarity, for example, in which the fractal appears identical at different scales. Quasi-similarity. The fractal appears approximately, but not exactly, identical at different scales. Statistical self-similarity. This is the weakest type of self-similarity. The fractal has preserved numerical or statistical measures, which are preserved across scales.
All right, Charles Hugh Smith, before we begin to address the financial and economic situation, we need to take a look at social fractals and financial fractals and how we got to the position of rot that we find ourselves in. This is a recent story you've been working on, social fractals. Very interesting. Tell us more.
The idea of fractals, usually we refer to them in nature, like the way that a coastline looks ragged at 1,000 feet, and then it looks ragged at 10,000 feet, and so these structures are self-same, we call them. They look the same no matter what scale you're looking at. So, like in social fractals, if you take 4 honest people and you put them in a house, then that household is more than likely going to be honest, because that's the only characteristics that are available to that household. So if you take a household that's hardworking and honest and responsible and caring, you're going to have a community that has the same characteristics. So then you go, okay, let's take all those communities and put them in a country. Well, then how come the United States is so visibly corrupt at every level? So you have to wonder, how come basically honest people end up with a totally corrupt nation? Then you start asking, well, how did that happen? And then I think the answer is, when the top level of the society and economy is totally corrupt, then everyone below starts realizing they're going to have to game the system by becoming corrupt themselves to get ahead.
So if you have looting at the top, you have looting at the bottom. And so these things are all connected. You need some kind of role model at some point. Now, speaking of social fractals, Greek Prime Minister Lucas Papademos said that if the austerity measures were not passed by Parliament, there would be a social explosion. Your thoughts?
I think, as we discussed on my last visit, when you deny democracy, when you put the financial and social future of your nation in the hands of bankers, then how can you expect any response other than an explosion against this sort of oppression and neo-feudalism?
Yeah, and on the worldwide basis, Charles Hugh Smith, if oil imports from Iran are cut off to Greece, what impact do you expect on the Greek economy in light of the fact that Iran was the only nation willing to sell them oil on credit?
It's hard to imagine the tragedy that's unfolding in Greece, where these dominoes, one after the other, that the government is ceasing to function, certainly as a democracy, and it seems to be ceasing to function as an organization that can serve its people. And so having a constriction of oil supply is almost, it's like I don't know whether you call it a death blow, or certainly yet another domino that's disrupting and impacting negatively the lives of average Greek people. And of course, does anybody care about that other than the Greek people? It doesn't seem to be registering, at the higher circles of power and wealth in the world.
Right, it's a snuff film. The folks in the IMF, the ECB, the Troika, and in Berlin, they get off on watching this poor little country die. Speaking of, to go back to energy here for a second, it's not just, we know that gasoline consumption is tanking. Also, energy across the board is dropping off in terms of demand. Now, tell us about gasoline and other energy consumption data in America and what this is telling us.
Well, if you track, like MasterCard does, sales at gas stations, those sales have been declining for 47 weeks straight. And in terms of gasoline consumption, it's like kind of fell off a cliff in the last few months. And energy consumption's been dropping since, the housing bubble popped in 2007. So the whole energy complex is showing, unprecedented declines in the U.S. And yet we're being told by the standard issue financial pundits and, financial media and our political class that the economy's growing and we're adding jobs and everything's great. And it's all like, well, wait a minute. Those two things cannot be true, because in an expanding economy, people use more energy. I mean, that's common sense, and the data proves it. And in a contracting economy, people use less energy. So somebody's lying, and I don't think it's the energy statistics.
First century, it's time to stand up and realize that we should not allow ourselves to be son œuvre est fondamentale et immortelle. Il est vraiment Amadeus.